Okay, great. Okay, so let me review what we're going to try to get done in the next couple of hours. I want to do a little bit of background on the project because it's important that y'all understand it at a high level. We're going to introduce ourselves in just a minute. Then what I want to make sure we do is to have a little bit of conversation about our recent experiences with dealing with people who look at racism very differently. I personally divide the world up into allies and skeptics. I have a very broad definition of what an ally is. A lot of people in the social justice movement have a more narrow definition, and I look at it like this. About 55% of white people think racism is not a real thing. 55%. So that means, so in my mind, the other 45% think that who do think it's a real thing. Those people are allies or potential allies. So those other people who don't think it's a real thing, I try to use neutral language in case one is ever listening to me. I don't call them racism deniers, although I think that they're denying. I call them racism skeptics because they're skeptical that racism against people of color is a real thing. So part of this conversation is about how do allies have effective conversations with racism skeptics, anti-racist allies talking to racism skeptics. So what we'll be dealing with today is what are some strategies for doing that on particular topics. That's what the toolkit is about generally. Today, we're going to be dealing with the issue of patriotism and kneeling at protests, et cetera. And let me just tell y'all that I just saw on my phone, this is from today's news. Like just today, Mike Pence walked out of an NFL game. He walked out of an NFL game because some people were kneeling. And he said he refused to dignify an activity, disrespect of the flag and the troops, et cetera. So this is from today's headlines. So what that also means is that you will have a chance at tomorrow's water cooler to practice the things that we're going to deal with today. Because by the end of today, the hope is that you have some tools to engage people who look at issues very differently than you do. People who tend to be skeptics. But this issue has been around for a year or so or more, and ultimately, I think that we need to start having better conversations about different ways that people, different groups, look at patriotism and what their experience is and how they reflect that in their behavior. So that's the overall goal for today. Any questions or comments about that before we introduce ourselves?
Just thank you for starting this process of helping folks kind of get into this in an effective way.
Sure. We're happy to do it. Okay, so what I want to I should also say that I'm so grateful to Rosa for helping, jumping in and helping. I have done webinars before, but not on this project and not with the lead kind of role. So I'm grateful to her, and she will keep me within the bounds and sometimes correct me if necessary. So what I'm going to try to do is to give a little glimpse as to what we are, what is the introduction process that we're going to use. Yeah. So somebody said something, what? Okay, so what I suggest we do is to go around the table and the virtual table and say our name, where you live, why you want to attend today, and one fun thing you've done in the last month. So it goes something like this. My name is David Camp. I live in Eden, North Carolina. I love having conversations about how people can have more effective conversations. And the other night, I came home from a trip where I had bought a whole bunch of clothes, and I did like a little modeling thing for my parents. And that was really fun. So name, where you live, motivation, and one fun thing you've done. And I'm going to get out of, I'm going to allow us to see each other. And so, Rosa, why don't you figure out the order of how we're going to introduce ourselves?
Sure. Since not everybody's first name is here. Well, yeah. So I'm going to go by alphabetical order. So that means, Jennifer, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jennifer Kitchen. I live in Stanton, Virginia. My motivation for participating, I'm the lead organizer and founder of an organization here in Stanton, covers Stanton, Augusta, and Waynesboro. We're about 1,000 people, and over the past few weeks, we've been having very difficult conversations about this very topic. We've started having small group conversations, meeting in coffee shops and restaurants, and I want to be able to give people tools to start having these conversations on their own with people who don't see eye to eye. Something fun that I've done, last weekend I participated in the March for Racial Justice in Washington, D.C., and we had a great time.
Cool. Thank you so much. Joyce, are you with us now? Okay, we'll come back to you. Leah?
Hi, I'm Leah Boyd. I live in Buckfield, Maine. The reason that I'm on the call is that I'm a communications skills trainer and a mediator, so I spend a lot of time with people who are struggling with communication, and I also work with groups, and it seems like the issue of race is so present in so much of the work I'm doing these days, and I just interested in being more and more skillful and learning from folks who've maybe been addressing this topic a little longer than myself. And something fun I did in the last month, I think I'm going to say that I went on a nice trail ride on my horses the other day, and the fall colors were gorgeous, and just the smell in the woods of the trees losing their leaves, and it's just lovely.
Great, thank you. So Nancy.
Hi, am I speaking?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm Nancy Nisselbaum. I live in Forest Hills, New York. My motivation for being here is just to learn a little more. I have a 16-year-old son, and the world sucks, and I want it to not suck for him. The fun, we're going to Rise of the Jack-o'-lanterns tonight, so that if it doesn't pour down on us, that should be a really cool experience, and taking my son and a friend of his.
Awesome. Peggy? Whoops, you're on mute, hon.
I think I did it now.
Yay, yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I'm Peggy Smith. I live on the coast of Maine, which is the whitest state in the nation. And that's not why I moved here. Let's see. It was fun for me to hear that, David, you know some people from the Reagan era. I was already in the woods by the Reagan era, so I'm glad to hear that there are some folks who have a little history. I work with Leah. We both facilitate and help teach communication skills. One of the places I work is a jail, men coming out of incarceration, and the topic of racism comes up more and more frequently in our group discussions at the jail. And I'm interested in some very specific ways to help that conversation unfold. Also, my communication work, but also I participated in a meditation community that's leadership comes from Vietnam, and there's some interesting growth and tension within the community between Westerners and people whose origins are in Vietnam. And it's a topic that's very tender and people are really wanting to get into it. So I'm here to enhance my capacities. Something fun. I've just spent 2 days hiking on Mount Desert Island with some friends. But a second fun thing is I've just started cleaning out my kitchen shelves, which have not been aired out in decades. And I was dreading it and also finding it quite fun.
Yay, thank you, Peggy. Todd?
Well, hello. I'm Todd, and as I mentioned, I live in Alameda, California, in San Francisco Bay. And wow, what drew me to this is really personally wanting to be able to have more productive conversations with other white people, but and professionally, I design and help facilitate large, collaborative, inclusive meetings. And the topic of racism and white supremacy, and most complex topics that we're facing, require us to really learn to understand each other, and doing that through dialogue is how I've been working. And I really want to learn more about how to have productive conversations around this topic of racism and white supremacy. And there's clearly a need, and I'm the great concern about the way the country's divided, and how it seems harder and harder for us to come to a shared understanding. And so here to learn.
Great.
And a fun thing, yesterday, so living back in San Francisco, there was a free concert in Golden Gate Park this weekend, over 3 days, 5 stages, and it was just amazing. Yesterday I went out, and it was a day of music in the park with thousands of people, all kinds of folks. It just made me realize how grateful I am to be back in San Francisco, and just rich diversity, free, people just coming, bringing their food and drinks and whatever, and just, getting down. It was really great.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Rosa, Zareta. I live in Western Massachusetts now, although I'm originally from the Bay Area. I'm here because I think that empathy is hugely powerful, and racial issues are hugely challenging. And so it's really important to be able to use our most powerful tools to the places where there is the largest need. And one fun thing over the last month is I'm also in school, and I'm taking a course where we were asked to do a timeline of our lives. And so I brought one of my facilitation easels and put some paper on it and started to draw, because the professor wants some kind of creative expression. So I'm just having a lot of fun drawing highlights of my lifeline. So, okay, and I'm really glad to be here. Over to you, David.
I think I saw Joyce's thing light up. So, Joyce, are you there?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 So I can't figure out how to use my mic, but I am here. And I came in late, but I think I figured it out, what you're doing. You're saying why we are on the call and others sharing this, and something fun we did yesterday. Am I right?
Something fun we did in the last month.
Excuse me?
Something fun we did that you did in the last month.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm on the call because I heard about it from Peggy, and Peggy and Leah have been mentors of mine in nonviolent communication. And one of the things that I've been using that with is a small group in my local area. We are starting a welcoming initiative to help a small group of us interested in training and getting better at talking to people who think differently from how we think. And in that intersection of our community, there are people who have strong opinions about people who are different looking. As I think I heard Peggy say, there are not many different colored, meaning all different races here. But there's strong racist feelings underneath what people say. And so I want to know how to be triggered less and be more effective in those conversations. And a fun thing that I did yesterday actually was walking in our orchard, picking apples that were ripe so we could have an apple tasting with friends, which was wonderful.
Cool. Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you so much. So Joyce, just to clarify, you're on a phone, you're not on a computer with a camera?
Correct. I've never quite figured out that technology. It's something I obviously need to do.
Okay, just to clarify. Okay, fine. All right. So thank you all so much for that. So clearly this issue is a hot issue, both, in the long run, as Nancy referred to, we're trying to make a better world, and in the short run, the things are happening right now, even as the reason as today, that we need to learn how to talk about better. So I'm really grateful for everybody to join. So I want to say a little bit about the project before we get into today's topic. So the White Ally Toolkit is designed to focus on the particular issue of equipping white folks to how to talk better, to white allies, anti-racist allies, to talk to racism skeptics. So it's precisely on that. And so we know that ally work, if you're going to be anti-racist allies, there's a whole bunch of things that you could be and arguably should be doing, and talking to skeptics is only one of them. And this project is focused on that particular issue, because I think that a lot of people do not know how to talk to their cousins and their mamas and their uncles and their neighbors about these issues in a way that produces that has a chance of maintaining connectivity with that person and also inviting them to expand their thinking. So this is precisely on that topic. The project has several different modules, some of which are primary, some of which are kind of secondary. The primary ones have to do with the core things that we think that people need to know. People need to think about, where does even talking to skeptics fit within the overall work as allies? So there's a prioritization piece. There's the issue of how to listen better. Listening is such an important thing that we have to learn how to do. Our culture is trained for people to talk, not to listen. We need to learn how to do that. It is important that people connect with the whole othering process. Like the core dynamic psychologically of racism, I think, is turning some people into other than me or other than us. And so we need to know how we do that and to think about that and, some level, prepare ourselves to talk to people who do that way more than we do without judging them. So the question is, how do we connect with that and how do we talk about that in a way that invites them to admit what they're doing? So not from a place of where I'm better than you, but we are all, we're fellow travelers afflicted by the same virus. And of course, there's the issue of unearned racial advantage. I tend to not call it white privilege, because I think that triggers people and it generates defensiveness. But there's an advantage of being white. So how do we talk about that? So those are kind of the core modules. And then the other ones have to do with patriotism, police community relations, economic disadvantage, how long ago was slavery, Jim Crow, et cetera. There's several at that level. So that's the way the project is structured. So I'm doing these workshops around the country. There'll be an online element that I'm trying to build. So there's different elements to it, but from a conceptual standpoint, that's what we're trying to address. How do white folks who are allies talk to other people about these issues, and what are the things they have to do in order to have those conversations have a chance of being effective in influencing other people to expand their point of view? That's the big picture on that. Okay. Sorry, what?
You go tonight, or are you leaving it here?
Okay. Nancy's managing her teenager. All right. So today we're going to focus on this issue of patriotism and kneeling, and because people have strong feelings about that. And there'll be great opportunities for y'all to start tomorrow or even tonight to talk to other white folks about this. And you probably know somebody who feels very differently than you do. So that's fantastic. So that's what I think that the kneeling thing is ultimately a proxy for a conversation about patriotism. And people of color and white folk often feel very different on patriotism. And so now we have this national issue ginned up on some level by the administration to drive the point home, to perhaps build a wedge, or perhaps it's a conversation opportunity for us to talk about different ways of viewing that. So that's our focus today. So before we continue on, though, I want to give room for us to bring to bear some recent encounters that we might have had with people who are racism skeptics. So let me just show you the questions I think it would be useful to address. So the question would be, thinking about your encounters with people who might be called racism skeptics over the past few months or recently, what are some takeaways, some lessons, or some lingering questions you have? When we've done this in the past in person, what usually happens is that we find that there's wisdom in the room about things to do or things to not do. And that's useful to have people express that from their own perspective before we start laying out our concepts that are based on years of dialogue experience and research, et cetera. But I just want to see if there's a little bit of wisdom that we have, or for that matter, questions about encounters across this divide, across the divide between anti-racist allies like yourself and racism skeptics, people who are anywhere from avowedly racist to they just don't believe racism is real. What are some takeaways, lessons, or lingering questions that you have?
Well, a takeaway for me is often they don't see it. They don't think of themselves as racist, or if they're just, it's, you know, of course I have black friends, you know, and they don't see it. They don't see how they're treating the others, you know, other than that it's not an other than in their mind. They don't see their privilege. They don't get it. You know, it was just, I'm who I am. I came up and what, you know, I didn't get it. So there's a big, you know, ignorance. And
so what does that mean about the encounter? So when you're talking to them, how does that, what are the implications of that for your encounters with them in terms of the things you've learned are helpful to do, or things you've learned that are important to not do to make the encounters productive?
Well, you know, I honestly don't have a whole lot of experience, you know, confronting this, you know. So I think what you know, just in my own thinking about how to approach someone with a different perspective, it's really to go into it, you know, listening and trying to understand where their mindset is and how they got there, before just, you know, calling them out and starting to, you know, you're wrong, and, you know, so and espousing my understanding and point of view. So it's challenging when they can't see it. So you have, you know, so that's where I'm at right now. That's
okay. Other comments from other folks about
we over Yom Kippur, we got together with a bunch of friends to do the break fast, and we ended up talking about the kneeling itself. And, you know, a good friend of mine, I love her dearly, he's a millionaire. Why does he have to kneel? Why can't he express himself in some other way? So I'm sort of looking, you know, for how to counter that better. You know, there are some media reports about how he does do stuff throughout the year that supports his feelings and supports underprivileged neighborhoods, but she knew nothing about that because, number one, she's not looking. So sort of how do you bring this to people's attention? You know, I have some very conservative cousins, and there are topics that we don't discuss because there's no discussion involved. It's this is my side, this is my side, and we're never going to meet.
Right. You've been burned by discussing it in the past, I'm presuming. You've had,
yeah.
Everybody's walked away feeling bad about the discussions,
exactly.
I think the most complicated conversation I've had in the past few months has been with my mother, and the fact that my mother and stepfather fly the Confederate flag. I was not raised in a house that flew the flag, and it's something that she's come to accept and almost embrace in this odd way as she's been in this relationship with my stepfather. After some difficult conversations, I had noticed that they had taken the flag down, and I thought, oh, maybe we're getting somewhere. But it turns out the flag was ripped by the wind, and that's why the flag isn't. So this is something that is going to need to continue, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get it. It's that whole heritage versus hate thing, and they feel it's part of their heritage. Refuse to see that it's become a symbol of hate.
So have you found any strategies to be either particularly not helpful that you're prone to do, or particularly helpful in trying to have a conversation about the flag or about anything related to
that? It's not helpful to make it personal. That's for sure.
Tell me about what you mean by that.
To make them feel guilty, I guess. I have a tendency to use language sometimes that I think leads them to feel guilty, that I'm accusing them of things.
Can you give me an example of that? Like,
maybe being racist is something that they're not ready to hear, that's what they are. They're not ready to accept that. So for me to put that out there puts up this immediate barrier and sort of shuts down the conversation.
Okay.
I need tools to figure out a way around that to make it more constructive.
Got you. So other folks, I know that there's some other folks on the call who have done a lot of studying of nonviolent communication. I'm wondering, do y'all have anything to bring to bear? Not that, again, it could be lessons about what doesn't work, or lessons about what does work, or just questions you have that might be useful for us to lift up to the group.
Well, I can offer something that I noticed. There's a difference for me in how I navigate these kinds of things when I'm in a role as mediator versus when I'm speaking with family members. And I noticed that I'm not an awful lot more skillful in my role as mediator. And so I was mediating in a situation where a young white man was telling me in a private confidential conversation that he was terrified about his children being with his wife because she was keeping company with those black people that come across our border and sell drugs and rape our women. And inside me, I could feel the great shock. And in terms of being in my role and being skillful, I was able to ask, are you terrified because you so value the safety of your child? So I was able to, go for a deeper need to empathize, to connect with his humanity. And I like to think I'm pretty darn good at that in role. But when I talk to my sister-in-law, it's a really different situation. She really, really believes that she is the poster child for non-racism, that she, lives to a very high standard. And she will say things that, I guess one that got me recently was, I just have no capacity to see color. I'm completely colorblind. And
that's my mother.
yeah. And I'm just, in that moment kind of stopped in my tracks and don't have the same skillfulness that I would in my role. In my role as mediator, I might say something like, wow, I wonder if you're just really celebrating how much you value all people's lives and seeing people as equals. In my role, I would do that so easily and effortlessly. But when I'm having lunch with my sister-in-law, all of a sudden my skills go out the window and I'm just dumbfounded. So I'm hoping to get a little more skillful in real life.
Very good.
Got you. I think we're joined by Sally.
Hello.
Hi, welcome to the call. So I assume you're not on the computer, you're on the phone, is that correct?
I'm on the phone watching my computer. I don't understand. Should I not be doing both?
Well, you're fine. Rosa, you want to have anything to say?
Yeah, if you can get on the computer, like if you can turn on your computer audio, it will make it easier for when we go into breakout rooms and we pair up with one another.
I don't have a camera on my computer, but...
Oh, you don't have a camera on your computer. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But you said it's still true, isn't it, Rosa, about the breakout rooms?
I really don't know how the breakout rooms will work, but my understanding is that they don't work unless you're on the computer.
You can be on the computer without video, but use the audio.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, so if you are on the computer without video, but you're using the computer audio, but that's why I was asking Sally to see if she can switch over to the computer audio.
Right.
So that she's not on the phone. We won't see you, but we'll still hear you.
And you could be in the breakout room.
Yeah.
Well, okay. If I knew how to do it, I'll work on it.
Okay,
click on the link that David sent and see what happens.
Yeah, so you can sign off of this call, and what you do is at the bottom right, when you scroll over the screen, there'll be a little thing that says end meeting or leave meeting. And if you jump off and jump back on, you don't have to do it right now. You might want to do it, but if you do it sometime before we break off into groups, that would be good. And then just sign back on, and usually the computer will say, do you want to use your telephone or do you want to use computer audio, and just say computer audio.
Okay, give that a try.
Okay, I'll try. Thank you.
All right. So thank y'all so much for that. Really appreciate that. It's always useful to hear people's sort of the wisdom of the group about how to do that. And I think that some of the things I'm going to share are going to address some of what y'all have talked about and reflect some of the wisdom that y'all already articulated. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is to share a short video. It's less than 4 minutes. I think it's less than 3 actually, about what we know about influencing people. And it applies to the race issue, but it also applies broader than that. So I think you'll find it valuable. So I'm going to do unfortunately, Joyce and Sally won't be able to see it, but you were able to hear it. I think you'll get most of the benefit, although the video is kind of fun too. So let me go ahead and do that.
Wait, do you want to see it?
If you've spent any time on Earth, you might have noticed that humans are not the most rational of creatures. We make decisions based mostly on emotions instead of facts, and a lot of times we're guided by tribal instinct. Part of the problem is that the human brain evolved to help us survive, and not necessarily to help us be factually accurate. So we often respond better to social and tribal dynamics than to intellectual analysis. For example, if someone's tribe believes that Obama is a secret Muslim born in Kenya, that person probably thinks that hard proof of his US birth certificate is fake. That conclusion is neither rational nor accurate. But from a tribal perspective, it makes sense. It's safer to agree with your tribe and stay united ideologically, even if you're wrong about the facts, than to disagree and isolate yourself. Another part of the problem is that our brain is constantly protecting our worldview and sense of identity. So when our worldview is challenged, that same part of the brain that processes physical danger gets activated. This is why people sometimes react so aggressively to information that proves them wrong. And this is why it's often so hard to have an intelligent political debate. Several studies have also shown that there is a backfire effect that happens when people encounter facts that contradict their current beliefs. They actually become more convinced of their original ideas. So fighting ignorance with facts is like fighting a grease fire with water. It seems like it should work, but it actually just makes the whole thing worse. Lastly, there's the problem of lack of empathy. Several studies have found that when humans are divided into groups of any kind, we instinctively become less empathetic to members of other groups. That means that for survival's sake, we might instinctively empathize less with other races, other nationalities, and even other sports teams. This instinctive dehumanization of other groups is what makes things like slavery and genocide possible in our society. So, what can you do? If you want someone to consider factual information that clashes with their beliefs, first, you have to prevent their brain from seeing you as a personal threat. So, look for ways to identify the person as part of your tribe and you as part of theirs. Hey, we're part of the same family. Hey, we're both parents. Hey, we both still play Pokemon Go. Whatever. Anything that communicates that you're part of the same tribe. That's the first step. Second, consider the possibility that you may be wrong. Maybe the facts are not on your side, in which case admitting it will help you model to the other person that it's okay to be wrong. I understand that none of this is easy or smooth, but if we want to continue to function as a stable society, we have to learn to get past our own natural biases. Only when that happens, we will be able to move forward towards a better future. Peace.
Okay, so any top of mind reaction to that? Comments, critiques, hallelujahs, anything, any top of mind reaction to that?
I saw it, first of all.
Oh, great.
Yay.
So I'm not cut off. You said I wouldn't be able to, but I'm not cut off from your
You
screen.
don't have a camera, but you do have that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we can hear you just fine, and I'm glad you can see all of us, even though we can't see you.
Okay.
Great. So any other, from you, Sally, or anybody else, comments, top of mind responses to what you just saw?
I found, this is Joyce, I found it very interesting and helpful, that idea that find the way to identify as part of the same tribe before you move forward. Makes a lot of sense to me. So that was really helpful. I wouldn't mind seeing that video again. I think it has a lot in it. Thank you.
It's interesting to learn that leading with facts isn't always the best way. As a logical, organized person, these are the facts. Why don't you understand them? But I can see how that can also be attacking or feel attacking.
Yeah, you can think of it as like people's beliefs, not unlike the video you saw. Like I use the analogy of like people's beliefs are like a castle surrounded by like a moat, right? And the castle has turrets and the moat has alligators in it. And when people feel attacked, what they do is they put rats in the water so the alligators get excited. Put snipers on the turret so they're ready to shoot you down, and they go into defense mode when they feel like you're attacking their worldview. So your job is to try to let the drawbridges come down, and what the video talked about was some strategies for doing that by making them think, I am like you, I am not an invader, I am similar to you. So the question, it becomes, how do you do that? And what we're going to explore is, I think storytelling is the way to do that. Well, the most important thing is to listen first, get them to talk to you, hopefully about a story that is related to their beliefs, and then you talk to them after hearing them and really making them feel listened to. Then you move forward to telling some stories yourself in a particular order that I think is more effective. But yeah, it's the backfire effect is really important to understand. And and again, people have deeply held beliefs, but there's strategies for trying to address it. So that's what we're dealing with. Any other comments before we move forward?
So I've tried this once recently, because I think you mentioned this to me before. I belong to a horse group where 8 of us are rabid one tribe, and there's one rabid the other tribe. And, we keep saying, we love you because you're part of our horse group. Let's talk about stuff. And there's a reservation there that she's, yeah, but you don't really like me, because it's not enough to identify, yeah, you love horses, we love horses, let's forget all about it and have fun. What's the second step to identifying that you're part of the same tribe?
Well, I think the part of it is that there's different ways because we're so many part of different tribes. It could be that part of the challenge is to try to find out some level of affiliation that is going to have more emotional resonance and generate less resistance itself. So first of all, as a general matter, there's nothing that works all the time to everybody. But I'm just saying, I think that the strategy, the insight here is that you're trying to build connectedness, and you need to be creative about how you got to do that. Peggy, were you gonna say something?
I was just, I was intrigued by that comment about communicating that you're of the same tribe. And so I'm inviting myself to journal on different tribal groupings that I might be able to pull out in the moment, because I notice, particularly around, actually racism is probably one of the most fragile, challenging conversations for me. So I shut down pretty quickly. So one, I've been thinking I need a lot more empathy for myself, and I want to experience just brainstorming different tribal groupings I could come up with my guys coming out of incarceration, so they actually had a sense that I was being sincere. So I have some homework for myself.
Yes. Yes, this project is about creating homework for people. Exactly. So, all right, so we're going to move forward. So what I'll do is to share the core method of this project. Then I'm going to share some insights from researchers about the moral frames and patriotism. And then I'm going to say, okay, look at after you know the core method, we look at this other research. Now, how do we apply that core method to the topic of patriotism? So that's what's coming next. So the core method of this project, I'm going to go back to a screen share now, is a four-step process, which I think is best, the acronym RACE helps try to remember it. So basically it's a four-step process. Reflect, ask, connect, expand. Reflect means before you go into a conversation, get together a few things. First, what is your conversational strategy? So that's reflect on that. Second, what are the keys to you being the best listener possible in this moment? What do you have to do that? And then, perhaps most important, what are the experiences you're going to share? Because you're going to share a couple of experiences that have a particular point, and you want to get those together in your head before you're in that conversation. Okay, so you're done your reflection. Next is ask. So essentially, you're asking them to say more about what they believe. So the first level of ask is say more about what you think so I can understand it. But then the critical thing is to say more, tell me an experience or two that is animating or driving your belief. Tell me something that happened to you that when you first started thinking like that, or something that happened to you recently that reinforces your belief. You're asking about a personal experience. You're essentially shifting the conversational ground from opinion to experience, right? So by asking questions, right? Okay. So after they tell you some experience and you're listening attentively and doing all the things that is important to know how to do, then you connect with them. And how do you connect with them? You connect with them by sharing a personal experience that shows you have some similarities with their perspective. Some similarities. Not you think of the same way completely, but you have some similarities with their perspective. So they tell you a story, you tell them a story that shows essentially I'm not completely unlike you. Part of the bigger superstructure that happens in the U.S. now, especially between conservatives and progressives, or especially around race, which is largely but not exclusively a conservative to liberal conversation, is people are defining, people think we're in separate tribes. And part of what you're trying to do is to say, well, I'm not just, in the extreme version, I'm not just a libtard or whatever kind of negative views they have of people who are progressive. I'm somebody who is not completely dissimilar to you. So you're connecting by telling a personal experience that is relevant to the topic that shows you have some similarity to them. Then you expand by sharing a personal experience that will tend to expand their point of view. Part of what happens is that the natural response is for people to try to go right to expand, right? What you were talking about, Nancy, about breaking down facts, what you're trying to do is to, what often you're doing what most people do, which is if somebody says something and I'm gonna expand their view now, right? Let me blow them away with this fact and then drop the mic on them, and then they're just gonna quiver in my brilliance, right? But we try to expand before we do the other method, before we ask, before we connect, right? So this method is about these steps, and then at the end, or certainly not at the beginning, you share some personal experience that tends to expand their view. So notice what you've done. You shifted the conversation from their opinion to their experience, and then you offer some experience that tends to say that, you know, you're right about something, but then also, but there's more to the story to think about. All right, so that's the basic overview of the method. I want to, before I continue on around patriotism in particular, I want to give any kind of top of mind response to that. Does that make sense? Does it sound wrong? Does that sound, you know, give me some feedback on that, or any top of mind comments.
It seems like a nice model, nice structure, and I can see how it works. And I started writing down different ways I could relate to, you know, like, who else am I besides, you know, part or whatever I am. You know, someone who might think differently than whoever I'm talking to, you know, that would kind of get me to relate and expand on who I am. And so that was interesting to try and like expand the you know, like who I am and how I relate.
Okay. Any other comments before we go forward?
I missed the introductions, and I apologize for that, but refuse to explain the. But are there any? Is everyone on this group a conservative or a liberal or something in between?
Oh, we didn't do that. There might be conservatives on here. What I've found is that, although it's not universal, much of the what I talked about before you got there, much of the division between between white folks is 55% of white folks believe racism against people of color is not a real issue. It's racism is like disease or sin, or it's just a general human condition. And then 45% of white people think that racism against people of color is a particular problem that needs focus. So the conversation is about the second group I'm calling anti-racist allies, talking to the first group, which I'm calling racism skeptics. It is the case that there are conservative folks who are anti-racist allies, and there are liberal folks who are racism skeptics. That's true, but generally, this is a conservative versus liberal thing, but it's not exclusively that. Okay, so let's move forward to talk about patriotism in particular, and well, first about moral frames. So y'all may have noticed that there's a book that's been on the bestseller list in New York Times called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. And one of the core, it's a really great book. One of the core messages that he summarized from his own and other people's research is that conservatives and liberals have different moral frames. It's important to understand a little bit about that. I'm going to review that briefly. So one way to think about it is that their findings is that there's, going around the world, there's sort of 5 different moral dimensions that people tend to focus on. And they are harm and caring. You got to reduce harm and try to have caring, especially for people in your group. Justice and fairness, loyalty, authority, and purity, sanctity. Now, here's the trick to understand is that as a general matter in the US and even broadly around the world, people who are liberal tend to focus on harm and caring and justice and fairness. If you think about it as an equalizer, right? Think of, we all have seen, remember those equalizers where you're adjusting music? You think about, like, for liberals, harm and caring and justice and fairness are turned up to 11, as they might say in Spinal Tap. They're all the way high, and the other ones are low. Whereas conservatives, the things are more equal across the board, right? So harm and caring, justice and fairness matter, but also loyalty matters, authority matters, and purity and sanctity matters. So part of what happens is that in our culture, which has become so divided, the way that liberals only evidence focus on harm and caring, justice and fairness becomes a signal that they're in a different tribe, right? And of course, it is true that people look at things differently. So part of the question becomes, if you're trying to convey to somebody that trying to reach them and try to have a conversation where you might try to influence them, you might want to be careful to not signal that you only are concerned about harm and caring, justice, and fairness. That might be a strategy. One can think of it as all of these things matter to us, but they matter differently, and we're going to pull out different parts of ourselves to try to connect with people. Okay, so that is one level of this that needs to be considered. And so that's in general, and that goes across a lot of issues. And again, I would commend you to look up Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. He has a TED Talk that relays some of this stuff out. He's relatively pretty entertaining as well as insightful, and I think it's useful to check him out. Again, Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, author of The Righteous Mind. Now, I'm going to refer to the thoughts of another Jonathan, who's someone named Jonathan Chait, who have a short article in New York Magazine, which I think was really profoundly affected my understanding. And he lays out different types of patriotism, different definitions of patriotism that we see in our culture today. And you could go from right to left, from top to bottom. So he would argue that one version of patriotism might be called an unshakable fidelity to my nation and my tribe. And so the way that those folks, Donald Trump is an example of this. The way that he and people like him look at America is, my nation is my tribe, we're good because it's mine. And we're going to work to bolster our power and our success. And that fidelity is unshakable, and we no disagreement about that, right? A more traditional conservative approach might be adoration of a historic innovation of self-governance. So from your typical, Republican, what you'll hear about is America as an exceptional nation, as the light of the world, as we've made an important contribution to mankind. And yes, there might now and then be some flaws in what we did, but ultimately we are a great innovation to the advancement of humankind. And we're unmatched, and we need to continue to work for the nation to bolster its contribution, both to ourselves and to others. A more classically liberal approach to patriotism, maybe exemplified by Obama, is an appreciation of a nation that's in perpetual progress. So our ideals are fantastic, though often they're not achieved. But we represent the best of the human experience. And what we're going to do is to be a patriot, I'm going to work to reduce its flaws, including the lack of honest self-reflection that we tend to have. And then, again, we're going from top to bottom on the screen, right to left politically. And then lastly would be a radical critique of the inherent sham of America. So these are people kind of on the far left who say America's never lived up to its purported ideals, which are really false narratives covering the venal motives by those in power. And the work is to expose this ongoing sham and radically overthrow its structures. Now, I don't have a handle on this. I'm happy to send people this if you want it. But here's what I would just argue before we go back to, as we continue. It is difficult for people to talk to each other across, if they're more than one mode separated. But it's difficult for people who have a radical critique to talk about to talk to people with the adoration of historic innovation, and go down the list. If you're more than one away from somebody, it is hard to have a conversation because your premises are just so very different. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's just hard to do that. So one of the things that I think is important to think about is the idea that there's certain advantages if we're further down on the list, especially if we're in that third category, because we're capable of feeling the things above that. As somebody who thinks more like I'm in the third category, maybe sometimes the fourth, I certainly can feel that tribal affiliation. When I'm overseas and I see another American, I'm like, hey, America, another American. I'm all excited about that, and we can revel about how great America is, etc. So I'm capable of feeling that. I'm capable of feeling the fact that the idea that America is a great nation, has really advanced the cause of human governments. I am capable of feeling that. And so part of what I think is the way to think about this is the further down the list you are, I think that those other parts are within us. And so it's the old Thoreau, I am multitudes, I am many different things. And so part of the challenge and the opportunity might be to call upon other parts of ourselves, not thinking we're being phony, but we're just in a particular moment, we're calling upon different aspects of ourselves in order to connect with somebody else. Doesn't mean other things are false. We're just making choices about what we choose to focus on at any particular moment. I want to lay out how we're going to apply this, but before we do that, any quick commentary about the things that I've just been talking about.
Can you put him up again?
Mr. Chait?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I certainly agree with the premise that we all fall into one of them, and that we like a person or understand somebody one or two below us or above us.
Just to be clear,
yeah.
What I said was it becomes difficult to have conversations if you're more than one away from somebody. You could disagree with it or disagree with me. I just want to clarify what I intended to communicate, which is conversations, if you're more than one away from somebody, are difficult. And I'm also suggesting that parts of us, many people have many things within us. And the further down the list you are, the more likely it is that you have the other parts of you, the other parts of you that can relate to the other parts of that. But yeah, this is just a thought system, and it might not work for you, but I've found it to be very powerful.
Agreed.
I'm gonna take it down, and again, I'm happy to send y'all that if that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
Peggy's digging it.
David, do you want me to introduce the writing activity, or is there more you want to do here?
No, I want to. Before we do that, I want to just say a little bit about I want to give an overview of it. Mm-hmm. So that's the backdrop to what we're going to do. In just a minute, Rosa's going to tell us we're going to do a writing exercise, and I want to just give you the context of that. So, and how we're going to do that. Okay. So how do we apply? So I've introduced the race method before, then we had a little conversation about patriotism. So here's what we're about to do. If we would apply this, we're going to do some pieces of this, and we apply this concept. If you're actually talking to somebody, which you have a chance to do, starting because of the controversy today, you want to prepare to engage, reviewing your strategy and your own story. The worksheet that I sent you has prompts you for two types of stories from your personal experience. You're going to ask another person how they feel when they, some question that is like how you feel when you see athletes kneel at games, and then also how they, a personal experience of feeling patriotic, which might be that, but it's useful to have them tell you a story about how them feeling patriotic. Connect. Tell them a story about a time when you felt a high degree of patriotism. So the idea is, maybe it was sometime at a game, maybe it was sometime when you were overseas. It just a moment in which you felt a high degree of patriotism. That's the connect part. And let that sit between you for a second. So, because again, what we find is that when people connect, actually something happens in our brains that makes us feel that furthers that connection. And then you expand. Tell about a time where you felt some loyalty to a group. I would suggest not the nation, but you notice that your loyalty was more complicated than some other people. So maybe in high school, you were not in the in group, you were in the out group. Or maybe in your family, you kind of felt like, hey, your family, they don't dig you as much as some other member of the family. Or it could be maybe a fraternity, some other situation in which that helped you understand that sometimes loyalty is complicated, that everybody doesn't have the same experience, and thus they don't have the same feeling about some group. So the purpose of that is to help them understand why you have some level of empathy for people of color who have ambivalence about patriotism, because they also feel like their loyalty is complicated, right? So Then, furthering the concept, you might, again, link your empathy to the athlete kneelers and maybe even ask them, have they ever felt loyalty to a group that was more complicated than other people? But the core thing to do this is to get your own story together. So that's what we're going to do next. And Rosa is going to give some guidance about how we're going to do that.
Thank you, David. So again, there's two stories. There's a connecting story.
I thought she would. Hey, Rosa.
Yeah.
There you go. Hi there.
Okay. So there's two stories. The first one is a story of when you felt very loyal or patriotic. So that's the connecting story. And then the second one is the expanding story, which is the one where you were having a feeling of complicated loyalty, and David's point that we don't want to make that about the country, but about some other group. Now, some of you may have the questions that we sent out beforehand. There's some question prompts that help you to think about different parts of your story. And then after you read the prompts and make some notes to yourself, then you can begin to turn your stories into turn your notes into stories. Now, you may not get all the way done with this in the 8 minutes we're going to have for this now, but the point is to just take a little bit of quiet reflection time to begin to look over the questions and to see what comes about what the seeds of your story might be. We're going to leave the screen on like this. You may want to move to a quiet place, but stay within earshot because we will ring the bell when we're calling everybody to come back, okay?
Let me say one more thing. I think the point is not necessarily to answer all of the questions. The point is to find a question or two that have the juice, because your objective is to come up with a story. So what I would suggest that you do is to read them all over first and then say, okay, which of these do I want to focus on? Because your point is not to answer them all, but to figure out which here can give you a story to tell. And that's on from both lists.
Great. Okay, you're on your own now for the next 8 minutes.
Do you happen to know if everybody got the document?
I don't. We can send it out again. Did you not get it, Sally?
I have one called the White Ally Toolkit. Is it in there? Materials, no?
Yeah, it's in there. There's 4 different things in there. The top, this particular paper says reflection questions to prepare for a conversation about patriotism and protests.
Okay, I did not get that because I signed up very last minute. Is that something that went out by email that could get sent, or could it be put on the screen?
What you should do is to go to whiteallytoolkit.com and then go to resources, the resources tab, and then go to let me make sure I know
Gotcha.
There's a materials tab on that.
But it's mytoolkit.com?
No, whiteallytoolkit.com.
Whiteallytoolkit.com, okay.
Right.
Background resources.
And then go to toolkit materials. They'll go to toolkit materials. Resources and toolkit materials.
Gotcha.
And then patriotism module.
Gotcha, the bottom one. Okay, thank you. Yes, I did get that then.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
We're taking 8 minutes of quiet writing time.
Sophisticated.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. So I imagine you just got started and there's much more you could do with your stories. But we do want to have an opportunity to have you share what you've gotten so far with one other person. And the way this works with Zoom is pretty cool. There's this breakout room feature. And what that means is that when I click on breakout room, it's going to ask you, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see, or somewhere on your screen, it'll say would you like to join a breakout room now? And you actually have to click on that, and then it will take you into a breakout room with another person. Joyce and Sally, if you could not click that and stay here, then you can give each other your phone numbers and just call and talk to each other on the phone. And I think that that will work well. And then when you're in the breakout rooms, you'll have 5 minutes each. At the end of that time, I'll send out a little invite, and that one is a countdown. And so it'll say you have 60 seconds left before you'll come back to the main room. If you click on that button, you come back right away. If you are in the middle of your sentence and want to finish up, then it gives you that little bit of time, okay? So we all set to go into our partners? Are there any questions before that?
I think I did exit and re-enter, and I'd like to try. I'd like to try to break out.
But since we have somebody who is on the phone, Joyce, I thought it would be easier if the two of you guys, because we're going to need one person to be on the phone anyway, so that there's a partnership there. Okay. All right.
And
numbers.
What?
Question here, Todd.
Sure.
To be clear, when we get into the breakout, we should share each other's stories. So should we each share the patriotism story and then go to the second one, or how do you recommend that?
David, I'm going to pass this one to you.
I would recommend that you share your patriotism story and then share the other story. Then the person give you feedback on that, and then the other person go.
So one person shares both stories. The other person gives feedback, and then it's the other person's turn.
And if you don't have the story developed, then just share what you are going to focus on when you develop it into a story.
In our feedback, what are we listening for, and what kind of lens should we be giving feedback?
You're listening for, did you kind of get it? Because the core message you're trying to get in the stories is different. So it's just, how did it feel? And it's not how did it feel? And are there any guidance as to what to, strength and weaknesses of that you would say, oh yeah, you might want to do this, you might want to do that, etc. You're just trying to help them do a little bit of sharpening of that. But we don't have that much time. The real value is in just the experience of doing it. So your goal is to listen attentively and to let the person and give them that sort of positive, that listening attention. If you have some comments about helping them improve the story, that's also great.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So this is going to be.
Rosa, should Joyce and Sally exchange numbers or something like that to me?
Yeah, but they're going to stay behind. They're going to stay in the main room. They're going to stay here with us.
How much time are we going to have?
You're going to have 10 minutes.
10 minutes total. Okay.
So Joyce and I are already on phones, and I should be able to hear her if she says something. Can you say something, Joyce?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, I can hear you. The rest of them are going away, right?
Yeah.
Or do you want us to call? I have another phone. I can call you, Sally, if you give me your number. Or do you not have another phone?
Well, then we won't be on the line with the group anymore. I mean, we can hear you, and they turned their mics off, so I don't know why we shouldn't just keep going this way.
Right. Is that what you want us to do, Rosa?
I'm trying
I
to
guess
set
you're right.
up
Okay.
right now, so it's
I mean, I can just leave my computer on and call her from a different phone and go in a different room, and then just listen for you to get us back together, if that's what you'd like.
okay. So if you guys can go into your rooms. Yeah, what I'd like is if you guys just call each other on the phone and then just jump back in when it's time. Okay? And I need to go.
So Sally, can you give me your phone number?
Yeah, I'll give you my cell, which is.
Hi, Peggy.
Rosa, are we in a breakout room together?
We are in a breakout room together.
Oh, how delightful.
Mhm.
So we have about 5 minutes each.
Yeah, and I am not preparing a story, so that means that you actually get a little bit more time to have your stories be heard.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, let me just say thank you for putting this out. And before I spread it too widely, I wanted to experience it myself. But this is a huge topic of interest in several different communities that I'm in. So just pass that along, that I think this has a lot of potential for David to expand.
Yes, I'm really excited about this work.
Great. Okay, I will start with my first story, A Feeling of Patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting to me how hard it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I reached way back. I remember a time when I was about 11 or 12 years old when my family went on a vacation to France. And my father took us to the American Cemetery for Normandy Beach.
Mm.
And around me, as far as my eye could see, as I turned all the way around, were just acres and acres of gravestones, all set out perfectly symmetrically. And it was just a very touching moment. It still is a very touching moment for me.
Mm.
When I think about it, I can still feel a lot of emotion of being there, and that emotion involves a lot of tenderness. And I definitely had a sense at the time of that this was something to be proud of, that this was a great sacrifice, and it was a great sacrifice done on the behalf of others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a very moving story. I feel moved.
Okay. So I mean, what I'm curious about is, as a receiver, like if you were in the top tier, is that going back to that, the tiers of patriotism that David shared? I think the group I find the hardest is the first tier, like my country, my tribe. So I'm curious to know if you think that had enough depth or flesh to it to be recognized as a story of patriotism.
Yeah, I think so. I think yeah, I mean, and you can experiment and try it out and see. And so then I'm curious what your second story would be.
Yeah, so the second story, I'm realizing I'd have to be really careful who I use this with. Probably many of the people in the top tier, I would not use this story because I'm concerned the story itself would be too triggering.
Right.
And that is that I lived for many years and taught for many years in Central Maine, which is a very Bible Belt area of the state. And Christmas was a huge part of the December climate at school. Really huge. Like you came back from Thanksgiving weekend and the whole school, gymnasium, hallways, everything was decorated Christmas. And Christmas concerts, Christmas events, Christmas gift sharing was a huge part of just everything, of the air. And not celebrating Christmas, I had a lot of resistance to this. And yet I really wanted to support my school and I wanted to support my students. So there was and I realized that for many years I sort of fought it. I was always fighting this cultural difference. And years into it, I realized it was like a flash when I got this aha of what it meant to many in the community. that this was just a very long-standing way that united children and the school, the people who worked in the school, not only with their families, but the community at large.
Mm-hmm.
This was a huge way, like the whole community would come to the Christmas concert. Not just people who had children in the concert, that this was a way that bonded the whole community. And it was really heart-opening for me. Even though I didn't really want to get on the Christmas bandwagon, nor I really wanted to convince people of authority that this was detrimental to my children because they felt they needed to belong. They needed to be a part of the whole process to belong. But yet I could see why changing the Christmas concert to seasonal holiday celebration was, I mourned for the people for whom this other piece was so in part of their culture. And I could see that it was like the beginning of the end of the small group tight-knitness of communities.
Yeah. Yeah. So I loved your story, and there were two places where I got a little lost. Like you said that you didn't celebrate Christmas, and so my mind started going to if you were Jewish, if that was why you didn't, and so you hadn't said, and so that made it harder to connect with the story. So maybe a little bit more there. And then I love the story. And it felt like, like you were realizing how important this was for these people, and how even though you don't celebrate Christmas, how there was a loss that was happening there. And so it was very, very moving. In terms of this particular thing, I'm still a little unclear in terms of like a situation where loyalty was complicated that might then invite people to connect with the people who are taking the knee. So this is a really powerful story for some purposes, and I'm that connection there in terms of finding a story. So your first story has said, yeah, I get it about patriotism, and your second story is like, sometimes patriotism is a little bit complicated. Or not patriotism, because we're not making it about the country, but sometimes loyalty to a group is kind of complicated. And I guess in this story, like it could be like you were feeling loyalty to the school because you want them to keep their traditions, but at the same time you were left out. I'm not sure. So that's a place where I would want to work it a little bit more.
Right. So maybe if I phrase it as it's not only that I want to support my school and the students and my students, but also to support the closeness of community being a really supportive sense of interconnection.
Right.
And so I really wanted to support that.
Yeah.
And I am torn because I didn't see my place there.
Right. And you're right. I think this could be a triggery story for some people, because they might think, well, what would the equivalent of taking the knee be like if you walked around being a Grinch on Christmas? And so, see, those guys on the playing field should do what you did. They should just suck it up because everybody else is having a good time. And, so it's like, how can we find a story? And it takes a while, but how can we find a story that the purpose of it is to create more empathy for the person who's taking the knee? So maybe a story where you actually chose to not go along with something that people were doing in the workplace, or with something that people were doing in your own family, even though you really want to be loyal to them, you felt like you had to not do something or somehow signal your protest, right?
Yeah, that's my a lot of my life is signaling my
Yes, exactly. So
that part's not hard. The part I think that's hard for me right now is thinking this story, I want the story to be connecting to someone in that first tier. This is my nation, my tribe.
Right. Well, maybe try with somebody in the second tier for starters, but also the story, that one story isn't having to do all the work because your first story is already heart opening. So you've shared your first story, you've connected a little bit, and then you're saying, yeah, so I get it about patriotism. And on the other hand, some part of me, and then you tell the story about a time where you kind of had to be in a rebellious role. And because they were open to you by your first story, then the second story might go in a little bit. So it's kind of like a 1-2, right? You're always telling both of these stories together. And I'm going to have to jump back because I have to call everybody into the other rooms.
Thank you, Rosa. And will I automatically go back, or how do I go back?
Once I go back, I'll set that up and you'll see. Hi, David.
Hey.
Hey.
I was trying to listen closely to, I believe, Sally and Joyce.
Oh, okay.
That's why I was looking down like that, because I'll put you're close to the thing.
Well, other people are going to be coming back any moment now, so maybe I'll ring the bell so that Sally and Joyce hear us as well.
Okay. Bye. Hello.
Hello, Sally. Did you hear the bell?
I did, and I saw the bell. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, okay. Because you guys
and I'm back too.
Okay, cool.
I just kept everything going,
You
and
just
we
kept
were on
everything
separate
going.
phones.
Perfect. And then that way you don't need to sign back on. Great.
Yep.
So we should be joined by everybody here momentarily.
That'll be Nancy and Todd, right?
And Jennifer.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Isn't it fun to get to kind of zoom into a breakout room and get to zoom back and meet the larger group again?
Yeah.
Yeah, here we are. Okay, over to you, David.
Sure. So I'm totally curious about your experience of both coming up with a story and sharing whatever you could, doing the worksheet, doing the sharing, and listening to somebody else. So anybody just, I didn't monitor the rooms, so I'm totally curious about how that went for you. What happened and how did you feel about it?
Are we a small enough group to share our stories with everybody?
I don't know that we have the time to do that.
Right. It's less about the story than how the process was.
Okay. I liked my story.
Good.
I would love to hear your story, but
some other day.
Well, also,
then even after 5, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, so folks who want to stay on after 5 and share the details of your story or just kind of, nosh around for a little bit, you're welcome to stay.
Oh, yeah.
I found it a wonderful experience. I found it very helpful. I found that I was able to actually come up with a story in terms of feeling the national pride, as well as where I have mixed loyalty with a situation that's happening right now in my community. And then just sharing it with Sally, she gave me just sharing it, I ended up with what she did in her community that might inform what I might offer to people here. So it was very helpful.
Awesome.
Cool.
Todd, you were going to say something?
Yeah, the assignment was really built a lot. It was great to have the prompt to think about that. I haven't thought about moments of where I felt patriotic and to really think about that and get it out. It was like I came up with when you offered it. It's like, oh yeah, that, and like that experience was. I've always thought of it as a powerful experience, but it recontextualizes a real patriotic experience that I think I could share with others to get them to relate.
Was it easy? How about the other one? Was it hard because the other one is inherently a harder instruction And it's a harder. How was it to try to come up with a story about complication?
Right. And I guess part of me didn't understand the purpose of the assignment or what I ended up taking was, a time when I felt as an other and how that felt and how that helps me relate to people who may feel like another. That was powerful because I don't think about that much, but there's a real deep thing where I felt an other. And it's something I have to be careful about sharing because it might also alienate people further.
Got you. Okay, so in a minute, I'll be happy to re-explain, apparently I didn't do enough job, the purpose of the exercise. So that feedback is useful for me to hear. Other people, was there similar, I mean, just in your reaction and also this thing about the second story especially, was it easy to come up with? Was the purpose clear like that? Because, did it resonate as an exercise?
I actually had an easier time with the second story, with the complicated loyalty. I kept looking at the first questions and didn't really have a yes answer to any of them. I came up with one for a feeling of pride in the U.S., but the other ones I couldn't really focus on. But then when Jennifer and I were talking, I was trying to decide if somehow we were supposed to connect the two stories, connect the feeling of pride, connect the complicated loyalty, and sort of come up with one story or one outcome from them. That's where I was getting confused.
Okay. All right. More feedback for the bad facilitator. All right.
No, David, it's Sally. I think here, because it happened to Joyce and I exactly, we started with one, and I kind of jumped right to two because any feeling I had of bald-faced patriotism was quickly dampered by an experience I had in Europe, where everyone was pretty quick to tell me, Americans have a heavy boot, you have a heavy footprint, and we want freedom, we love freedom. There was it was an Italian cruise ship and everybody was Italian except for us, or Mediterranean or Turkish or Egyptian or Greek. And they're quick to say we have very old, very wise ways of governing that you guys just maybe haven't caught up to yet. And it was humbling, to kind of listen to people who weren't in love with the rah, 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 red, white, and blue. They respected it. They're glad for our help when they need it, but they don't really want to be dominated by it, or so my patriotism quickly moved to a reserved, just like who was talking? Was that Nancy? Was it kind of
Okay, got you. Other folks, Jennifer, Peggy.
I found it difficult to stay positive in my first story, talking about patriotism, which Nancy helped me with. I would talk about something that happened and then immediately go to but then it falls apart. Instead of just being able to stay in that moment of being positive, I immediately was like, but then it doesn't last. So that was difficult for me.
Yeah, if you are a liberal person, you are almost trained to not stay in the positive thing about patriotism. No. But don't forget this. Don't forget that. Right. Exactly.
I would just say that I don't think the instructions were poor. I think the second question was definitely harder for me because I don't have experience articulating that and phrasing it in a way. I was trying to think of a story that, because I was looking at the first tier folks, my nation, my tribe. I wanted to create something that could be connecting. And I just, again, it's homework. It's like thinking more and maybe coming up with several different scenarios. So I'd have some fluidity to craft something in the moment.
Got you.
Okay. David?
Uh-huh.
Just hearing that there were some others that may have had difficulty with the instruction, or the maybe a suggestion is role modeling. Like if you were to role model what you were looking for us from, you know, it wouldn't take away from us creating our own story. But
I got it.
Oh, it's the dump to dump to dump. The dump to dump to dump.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, that's really helpful.
Let
me tell y'all before we move on. Our time is going. Let me tell y'all what the purpose was. What the point was. The idea, I think that the patriotism thing is easy to understand. The idea is that there might have been some moment in your past in which you are feeling that like, wow, America's cool. Right now, you know, you could probably, many people on this call might have felt that when Obama got elected, like that election night, certainly a whole bunch of black folk are crying. I mean, Jesse Jackson crying and Oprah crying, all that. But that was a classic example of when they felt a combination of pride in their people, but for the sake of this, they were talking about pride in the nation for doing that. So the purpose, the idea is that to call upon a moment where you are feeling pride, and it's not dishonest to call it pride in America. So yes, I should have modeled that. So I recognize that. So that's the purpose of it. And I recognize, Nancy, you said that was harder to do. I get that, but I would go further and say that it is hard. People who are liberal are trained not to do that, because of our culture of being a liberal. So part of the work is to find that and to be able to talk about the story without but yeah, there's another thing going on. And I think it's possible to do that in an honest way. So that's the first thing. The second one, the purpose of it is to not talk about the nation, but just to try to get the other person's head around the fact that if you're in an out group, or there can be situations in which you have a different relationship to something than other people. So this could be like, you know, your mom got remarried. Everybody thinks the second guy is great, but you don't. Or it could be you were in an out group in high school, and like every other people were loving it, but you know you were either bullied or just like considered a marginal person. So your feelings are more complicated. So for example, for me, like you know, if y'all follow me on Facebook, you know, Todd, I'm big into the whole Princeton reunion thing. I love dressing up like an idiot and going back to Princeton during reunions. But the fact is that I am not unlike other people who, like, as a black person, like we were questioned, the faculty questioned our validity, the students questioned our validity. There was a whole different experience. So black folks' relationship with Princeton is more complicated than white people's relationship with it. So the point is to call on a situation in which you illustrate, that which you embody the fact that, you can have loyalty, but sometimes it's layered. So now, the reason I have a question there about a second person is because some white folks have people of color who, you know, got beat up by the police or got stopped or have some other thing where there was some poignant moment of that. But I think more powerful is your own experience of loyalty being complicated. Now, what's the point of that? The point is to tell one story, have that moment of connectedness with the skeptic, and then say, but let me tell you about another story. And then you illustrate not about the nation, that loyalty can be layered. Sometimes, you know, like the ambivalence I have about Princeton. I'm loyal to it, but there's more layers going on than for white folk. And the purpose of that is to be a segue to say, so I kind of understand these black people who have ambivalence about the nation because they're in an out group. And you might even say, even before you get to that, have you, skeptic, ever had a more complicated relationship with an entity than other people? Because you're trying to get them to see if you have a complicated experience of some entity, might affect your loyalty has multiple layers. So that is the purpose of that. So yes, it's a couple of like other modules are not as complicated as that. this is not that complicated, but it has a couple other steps, because ultimately you're trying to get the skeptic to look at the fact that they might even have experiences in which their loyalty is layered. And then, okay, that's true. So how does that apply to people of color? Because they're still in denial that people of color have had a different experience. But part of what you're trying to get their heads around is sometimes loyalty is layered. That's the purpose of the exercise. And I'm certainly taking the feedback that I should set it up more clearly and give a couple of examples to illustrate that.
Okay, so is it time for making commitments to engage?
Oh, I don't think it's time for that yet. I'm gonna let that simmer for a second, Rosa.
Okay.
I'm gonna share with y'all like a little poem. That's a famous poem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that, let me see if I can do this right. That speaks of a certain ambivalence. So if I can do this right. Is it sharing? That it's an old poem. There you go. That Langston Hughes wrote. And you can read about this poem, but it basically, it's about like ambivalence. Like you're part of the group, but you're also in an out group. And that affects how you feel. Now, again, I am not suggesting that a skeptic you're just starting to deal with, you share this poem. I'm not suggesting that. But there might, at some point in your working with somebody and developing them over time, this might become a relevant thing to share.
Hey, David?
Uh-huh.
I'm wondering if that would work by digging into some poetry about what it means to be poor in America, not just Black in America, as a segue, so that people see that you're offering them poetry that actually touches their experience.
Maybe. I think that the core thing here, and that might be the case. I think that the core thing here is the experience of being in an out group.
Yeah.
I think that part of the disconnect around the kneeling is that, again, people who are conservative tend to value loyalty and authority more than others. But beneath that, they can't envision that people of color are in an out group. We saw racism a long time ago, right? So, now of course, there's ways to try to get around that, not all at once. But I'm saying they can't. A lot of folks, I think, have forgotten or can't instantly connect to, because of defensiveness, the idea that if you have a different experience of some social entity, you will have a different level of loyalty to it. So I think that, to me, I mean, I'm not saying don't do a poem like that, and I'm not even saying in the first conversation give a poem anyway. But I'm saying that your task from a communication standpoint is to get them to connect to the idea that if people can have different levels of loyalty depending what their experience is. That, to me, that's the point emotionally. Because once you get them to own up to that, then you can say, well, it might be the case that these people kneeling have their complicated feelings about the nation are not unlike your complicated feelings about your high school or your family or whatever. So you're trying to make an empathetic link to the issue of complicated loyalty, because when all they see is people disobeying, disrespecting, etc. But they don't. And of course, the nation is so important that they can't recognize that they may have had complicated loyalties in their experience too. So first, you're talking about a complicated loyalty experience you have, and then maybe trying to get them to see that, and then you connect that to what these people are doing. All right, we're getting to a closure. So one of the things that, let's see, how's this working? One of the things that I gave y'all in your packet is a thing called a ladder of retorts. And this is just an add-on I just provided that I thought would be useful. Sometimes, a lot of times people have asked me for Like, what do you say when somebody says something? And so this ladder of rhetorics is just like a little ladder that all the way from you didn't hear what they said to she said it again, I didn't hear you, right? All the way down to I'm going to create some negative consequences for you for saying that, right? So anyway, that's just for your perusal. I also, in the packet of stuff, there's a thing about a listening guide. It's some listening tips that people have found useful because listening is such an important thing. So I just wanted to add those. So now I think, Rosa, we can move on to what you were about to do before.
Yeah, so any commitments that people want to share in terms of a step that you want to voice for taking this work forward within the next week or the next month? I don't know what framework you usually use for commitments, David, but is there any particular?
Well, I mean, what's great about this is that this is from today's headline. So
yeah.
The opportunities to move forward are legion.
Yeah, so maybe the commitments could be to finish your stories and try them out on 3 different people, or, something like that.
What would going forward mean? I guess that's the question. Somebody wants y'all to go forward.
My dog has the same question. Come here. Come.
Well, I want to continue to look at the other tools that David has put together around this and find ways to connect with David and to bring this work to a wider group, I think. Not I think, but certainly weave it into my dialogue work. I'm sure I'll find personal situations where to utilize it as well. But I want to learn more about the other tools that you're working with. And, we're going to have a face-to-face workshop around here soon. I'd love to see that. And just continue to.
Does anybody have any racism skeptics in their circle that you might try this on, like within, I don't know, 2 weeks? Like, this is a hot issue. It was hot already, and then today happened. I'm just wondering. I'm curious as to the degree to which anybody feels like, okay, I might want to try that.
What? Go ahead.
I do.
You want to say?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Sally was going. I have family members that I would be more than willing to try this on.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. I would love to hear that, and I would love to find out how it worked. Like, part of what I'm trying to evolve this project is to really stay connected with people who I teach the tools to. Like, I've gotten some feedback that people are trying this stuff and it's working, but I haven't created a real structure to get that feedback. But that's part of my goal. So I would love to hear about that.
Okay, so should I just email you and see it? Okay.
That'd be great. Because part of I figure my feeling is that this stuff, the nature of this kind of work is that you learn from trying, reflecting. It's not just, none of this stuff is magic bullets, and we can refine how it is. So, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Joyce gave me an interesting angle that individuals we love. We might not like groups, but we love individuals. And some of the football players of all colors, races, they have been doing such great work in charity, in all kinds of public works. I mean, this started with Drew Brees back in Katrina, and it's gotten very, very topical lately. But I think if we can point out what the good the individuals are doing, how bad could they be for questioning their own, their own status in the country? So I imagine they're pretty crushed by all this criticism, frankly. A lot of them undeservedly pointed at, they've been pointed out when actually they're doing charitable works and things. Does that make any sense? I need to change my memes, in other words.
Let me give you some feedback on that, just to refine that. as was said earlier, Colin Kaepernick has donated like $1 million to various causes over the course of this last year. It might be useful if you're going to engage.
So has J.J. Watt, though.
What's that?
So has J.J. Watt, who people are criticizing now, too, for being with Colin. So,
okay.
But go ahead.
You're making my point. So it might be useful, if you're going to engage people on this issue, it might be useful to have the names of 2 or 3 of these players who to know here's who they are, here's what they did. So I think that to have that at the ready is true. But I would still commend you. I think that's a later stage conversation. I would still commend that you want to have an experience-based conversation first, because those are ultimately facts. And what I would commend is that what you try to do first is to have a conversation about experiences, and facts come late. They come, but they come later.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out when and how to start such a conversation. Because among some of my friends, I am, the libtard or whatever. Oh, don't listen to her. She's, all the way that way. So, yes, we had this conversation on Yom Kippur after the break fast. How do I bring it up again and use these techniques?
Okay. So what I would think about on that is you got to find your patriotism story, Nancy. You got to find it. You got to find it. So you get that together, and then get together the other story that's about you, not about the nation, but about the whole, like, why you get that stuff that the outgroup thing, that somebody can feel a layered and complicated loyalty. So so once you have that together, I would, I would commend you to the listening worksheet, and we can also talk about it. We can also talk about connecting with your own capacity to listen. So I would, you might practice telling the stories with some friendly audiences to kind of get, because we all have stories that we've told multiple times, and we tell them better the 5th time than the 1st time. So I would do that. Then I would, then one of these people, first of all, don't do this on Facebook. This is not a Facebook thing. This is about personal interaction. So, so that at the right time, I'd say, and once those are together, I'd go something like, how have you been feeling? It'll be from the day's headline. I was wondering, I want to revisit that issue around the patriotism, and because I'm interested in hearing, I know you're very patriotic, and you might feel you feel that, and I'm interested in tell me some moment in which, like, that exemplifies where you were filled up with that. So I think you can just raise it as a conversation about patriotism. Let them tell her story, listen attentively, make sure that they feel heard, and then you say, well, I sometimes feel that too, and then you go down the list. But so I don't think you raise it as I don't think it's most productive to raise it as, let me go back to let's go back and talk about all these people kneeling. It's more of a conversation about patriotism and when they feel that, and when you feel it, and then when it's complicated. And then at the end, maybe you're linking it back to, so because I know it's complicated, and then you might probe them on whether they've ever had complicated feelings. Then you link it back to that. That's part of that. What we just talked about. That's part of the reason that I could sometimes empathize with these athletes, because they come from communities that blah 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 blah, and but again, on some level, you're trying to seduce them into an admission, or at least an understanding that loyalty can be complicated.
Right.
And then you link it back to that. And again, this work, you're not trying to hit the home run all the time. Like you're trying to make little inroads in different conversations. So I would choose somebody to try this with who is even among the people who look at you as the libtard, et cetera. There's probably variation in openness among that group. I would choose somebody who's more open rather than less.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Awesome. Well, it is 5 o'clock now, so I want to acknowledge that we are at our end point, and I also want to invite any of you who would be willing to stay on for 5 minutes to offer us some feedback. What worked well? Anything that you think we should be doing differently? We've talked about some of those things already. And then any, if somebody told you that they were thinking of taking this workshop online with Dr. David Camp, what would you say? How would you talk about this workshop to others? So is that clear?
Maybe I can show, just to be clear, I can show you that here's what we're talking about.
What went well, what could have been improved, and what would be your honest message to someone thinking about being a part of a webinar like this? Okay, so if anybody needs to go, we totally understand. This is your opportunity to jump off. David, could you? Yeah, thanks. So
we hope you can just stay a few more minutes to give us some feedback, because this is the first time doing this, and your feedback is so valuable.
The first time doing this online. You've actually done this in person a lot, so yeah.
I do have to go, but I'll give a little feedback on my way out. I really appreciate starting this being the first. It's awesome, and it's like that's your over the hump. You can build, and I look forward to seeing the evolution because it's critical, and I think you'll find an audience that's willing, I think having these frameworks is helpful, and just to the end, I started to get, okay, here's how it could go. The stories are critical, and it's like it was great to have that opportunity to build the skills of learning our own story and being able to practice it one-on-one with someone. All great. It was how does that flow in an actual conversation with someone who thinks other, that it finally clicked for me, and the suggestion I already made around modeling it, or even creating a video where you actually show it in action, and maybe you don't show it in action till the end, or maybe you show it up front and then say, now let's practice you doing that for yourself, so that I could see the whole engagement, the whole interaction of how that could all go down in real life around the water cooler.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. But
all right,
awesome.
Thank you so much, Todd.
Thank you, and I do have to run. But
all right, thanks.
Connect with all of you.
Any other comments? Help us learn how to do this better.
I'm curious to know the pieces that you use for your PowerPoint that I would like to have. Are those in the toolkit that I haven't? I only looked at the one file that you said we needed for today. I don't mind. I'm happy to send you the entire file. Right. Entire PowerPoint. So if you say that up front, I think it will help people relax and not think they have to take all the notes.
Got you. Okay.
It's given me a lot to chew on and frame for myself, and I will definitely recommend to people that if you keep doing this, today I love Rosa, so when Rosa said I'm on with this, I said okay, I'm going to check it out. And now that I've checked it out, now I'll send it out to the next layer of folks, and it's a huge topic, even here in Maine.
Great.
So, it's a great resource. Thank you, David, for working on this.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you very much.
I mean, I think this was helpful in a number of ways in listening to how to approach and frame the story I want to tell. I like the idea of modeling, but I would also be careful of it because people tend to, well, let me rephrase that. I tend to latch on to, oh, that's what, so I like that idea. Let me do that too. So just keep the modeling more ambiguous if you can, I guess, because it's very easy to mimic the model.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks.
Thank you. I am gonna head off.
Okay, thanks.
So I'll say that I've really enjoyed this format. I really loved having the breakout room. It helps me a lot to process a little bit. And it's really got me thinking a lot about nonviolent communication and its place in this model, how to apply what we know and think we know in nonviolent communication to this model. Recently, I did a training called Radical Listening, and so I'm really about listening, and I'm going to be offering it again. And I think that what you've taught will be informing how I teach that next time. And so I'm enjoying that. It really it's really primed a pump for me, and now I really am eager to explore it more. And I will definitely recommend this to my circle of folks when you do it again.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. All right. Sally, you still on?
I'm here. I was thinking about my, where do you take it? And David and I have had conversations where, who's looking for this kind of insight and who's struggling with this is where I'd like to go down to our Quaker meeting in Guilford, North Carolina, which is one of the oldest famous, and they're big social activists. And I think they would eat this kind of thing up because, first of all, they like dialogue and they like to listen and they like to. But, I personally, I want to identify people who are interested in this topic, not drag my nets through town trying to find people who might talk to me if, I phrase it just right. Maybe that's cowardly, but I'd like to start with people that are interested in the whole topic of both community building and share. And I think it's a great format. I would much rather do it in person in a group because it's fun to see everybody. But love the materials. I can think of ways to use this.
Great. Thank you so much, Sally. Much appreciated. And I just want to say, I think that there's room for everyone. It's like, even if you never have a conversation with a racism skeptic yourself, but you turn 100 people who want to have those conversations onto this tool so that they can be able to do it more easily. It's like, there's really room for everyone.
Yep. Well, I'm so grateful for Rosa for helping me make this happen, and for everybody for participating. Thank you all so much, and I'm just in a stance of extreme gratitude for this today. So thank y'all, and keep up the good ally work, y'all.
Awesome.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes,
David.
thank you, David.
Okay. Take it easy, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.